Well, thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me to this, and for all of you for being here to hear me speak. So we're going to, let me go back to the title page here. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we use data analysis in the Florida Panthers organization. So I think the talk will be a little bit of a different focus than the previous three talks, in that we're going to focus on data analysis. And not too much as far as technology, which is maybe a little more general. So we're going to be a little more specific in this talk. And in fact, the first thing that we're going to talk about is one specific example of a project that we worked on with the Florida Panthers that involves data analysis. And it involves using both hockey and business data. And then we're going to give an overview of other ways that we have used data in the organization. And maybe I'll just give a bit of a background about the Florida Panthers. So the Florida Panthers Hockey Club is part of the National Hockey League, the NHL, which is the main pro sports, the main pro hockey league in North America. There's For most of the past several years, there's been 30 teams in the league. Just this year, we added one more team in Las Vegas, so there's now 31 teams. And we're one of the two teams that are located in Florida, which is, we're maybe 40 miles away from Miami, Florida. That's the biggest, the nearest big city to us. So just a little bit of a background for those of you who may not know a whole lot about our organization. And so let's get into this example. So here's an example that can apply to any sport, not just hockey. And so in this example, we are, so the goal of this project was to develop a statistical model for predicting attendance for our home games, using only information that is known before tickets go on sale. So that's sort of an important point. So we only want to use information known before tickets go on sale. And the reason for that is that we had a specific application in mind for this. So the application in mind was that we wanted to use this model to help us determine which of our games should be in which tiers in order for the purposes of variable pricing. So by variable pricing, I mean that not all of our home games are going to be equally as interesting to our fans and to the hockey fans in our area. So for example, two of the really popular teams are the Montreal Canadiens and the New York Rangers. Those are two teams in our league that have pretty large fan bases, and especially in the region of South Florida that we are located. So those games tend to be much more popular than other games, and so for that reason, we start with higher prices for those games than we do for other games, for a typical game. So what we're trying to talk about here is, well, how do we determine ahead of time, before tickets go on sale, how popular these games are going to be? All right. So so one thing that I just mentioned was, the opponent, the team that we're playing, might have an impact on how popular a game is going to be. And we'll talk about other things that would impact that. Another reason we wanted to use this model, another reason we wanted to build the statistical model, is to determine the kinds of things that we might want to request when the league is developing a schedule. So we don't get to determine our schedule. The league determines the schedule for all 31 teams. But we can make certain requests, and so what kinds of things do we want to request? So for example, one specific question that our leadership, our organization's leadership wanted to know about was, would we prefer a good team on a Saturday, and Saturday is typically the most popular day to watch a hockey game. Would we prefer a good team on a Saturday and a bad team during the week on a Monday or Tuesday? when it's not as popular to go watch a hockey game? Or would we rather a good team during the week and a bad team on a Saturday? In other words, do we want to focus all our attention on Saturday games and try to make them as good as possible? Or do we kind of want to spread the wealth throughout the week? And so that's one of the things that we wanted to try to answer with this model. And so we just wanted to build a model that included all the possible predictors that we could think of, the variables that might impact attendance, and take all of those things into account and try to model how they actually do, in fact, impact attendance. And so one of the first things that we did was we just built a visualization of some of this data. And so this data that we're going to visualize is just attendance by game from the 2007-08 season to the 2016-17 season for all 30 teams that were around during those seasons. There's 31 teams now, but that's starting in the 2017-18 season, which hasn't finished yet, so we're not including that season in our model. And so we're taking attendance by game from those seasons, and I should just point out that it's announced attendance. So a lot of teams and leagues might compute their attendance numbers differently. So I don't know what it would be in like the Australian Football League or anything like that. I think in most of the North American leagues, it's not necessarily number of people in the building. It's the number of tickets that were sold for that game, whether or not they show up to the game. It's the number of comp tickets given out for free for that game to different companies or charities or what have you. And that's whether or not they actually show up to the game. And so it's usually a combination of those two things. So that's what we mean when we talk about attendance. And so we built this visualization, and it's this huge mess here. And so before tackling this entire visualization, let's just look at the lower right-hand corner here, just these 4 teams in the lower right-hand corner, and zoom into the lower right-hand corner and just talk about this for a little bit. So what we have here is along the horizontal axis, along this axis is date. And so this is just showing the years here. So this mark right here would be January 1st, 2008. The vertical axis is attendance. So we have attendance along the side. And then each dot represents a game. And it's showing the date of that game and the attendance for that game. So for example, this game right here was a little bit before January 1st, 2010. And the attendance was approximately 14,000, I would say, just as an example. And so we've plotted, also each unique figure is for a different team. So this is for all New York Islanders home games. This is all New York Rangers home games. This is all for St. Louis home games and Tampa Bay home games. Okay, so this, I used to be a college professor, and I like to have very interactive classrooms. So I kind of want to turn this into an interactive classroom right now, if you don't mind. And I want you guys to tell me what you can learn from this visualization just by looking at it. I think it's a fairly simple to understand visualization. It's not too much complicated things going on right here, but I think it can tell us a lot about the data. So what can you tell me, what do you notice about the data? What do you learn about this problem from looking at this data? If anything. You could just shout it out. Okay, could you say it a little bit louder?
We can see maximum, minimum attendance level and we can also calculate any sort of average value.
Okay, yeah. So we can just at a quick glance at this, we can kind of get an idea of what the minimum and maximum attendance is for each team, and probably an average value. And it looks like it's different for each team, right? It's pretty different. I mean, the max value here is different from the max value there, for example, and that's just because this is a bigger arena. They play in a bigger arena than the New York Islanders play in. What else do you notice? What else do you notice? What do you notice about the max and min here versus the max and min here? What's that? Okay, so it doesn't look like the attendance fluctuates a whole lot for the New York Rangers, but it does fluctuate a lot for the New York Islanders. And so what's going on here with the New York Rangers? They're a very popular team. They're the most popular team in New York, and they basically sell out every game. So their attendance looks like it's flat for every game. Okay? Anything else that you notice? By the way, it's mostly flat here for the New York Rangers, but then it seems like it dips down and then goes back up a little bit here. Any idea why that might be? This probably, actually, you might not know unless you're a hockey fan or a fan of New York sports, but maybe there's a couple people here from North America that might be able to answer that question. Basically, there was construction at their arena during this year. So a lot of seats were taken away, and then once the construction was done, they went back up in capacity. So anything else you noticed from this data? 2010? For this spot right here? Okay, so any idea what that might be? So that's what we would call, data analysts would call that an outlier. So why is that all the way down here when everything else is kind of flat up here? So this is something that I noticed. This is one of the things that I noticed about the data by plotting it. And so it turns out that, and the reason I found out what it was is I built the model and then got some predictions, and then looked where our predictions did the worst. So I sorted, sorted the predictions to determine which ones did the worst in reality, and noticed that two of them that did the worst were both in the New York area on the same day. So then I Googled that date and New York, and it turns out there was a blizzard that day, which it made a bunch of people stay home, or it made them sell far fewer tickets than they would normally sell. So that's that game right there was there was a major blizzard that year, the day of that game. So that explains that data point. There's another outlier here, which I believe was something similar. It was some sort of weather-related event that caused attendance to be very low. But that's a good question, and that's one thing that we can learn about data by visualizing it, which is you learn about outliers, or you can easily tell which things are outliers. Is there anything else that you notice? Yeah.
네, NHL에 대해서 사실 잘 알지는 못하는데요. 레인저스 같은 경우는 항상 만석인 걸로 봐서는 팬들의 충성도가 굉장히 좀 높은 패턴을 보이는 게 아닌가 생각이 되고, 아일랜드 같은 경우는 상대팀에 대한 전적이라든가 성적 때문에 팬들의 운집도가 경기별로 굉장히 편차를 많이 보이는 게 아닌가라는 생각이 좀 듭니다.
Could you repeat the first part of that question, please?
레인저스 같은 경우는 이제 잘은 모르지만 굉장한 인기팀이라서 항상 만석을 이루는 경우가 그러니까 팬들의 충성도가 굉장히 높아서 만석을 이루는 경우가 좀 많다라고 생각이 되고, 아일랜드 같은 경우는 팬들의 충성도 같은 경우가 굉장히 낮기 때문에 상대 팀이 누군지 아니면 그때 성적이 어떤지에 따라서 팬들이 경기장에 운집하는 경우가 좀 다르지 않나라는 분석이 좀 되지 않을까라는 생각이 듭니다.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's one of the big reasons in the differences. It's one of the bigger reasons for the differences between the New York Rangers and the New York Islanders is that the New York Rangers, it's a much older team. So it was one of the original 6 teams, the first 6 teams that formed the league about 100 years ago. And the Islanders is they're a newer team. So the fan base for the New York Rangers is much bigger than the fan base for the Islanders. And it probably also has to do with location. So the New York Rangers play in Manhattan, in Madison Square Garden, right in the meat of the city. And the New York Islanders for a long time played on Long Island, which is a little bit farther away from the center of the city. They're now playing in Brooklyn, which is a little bit more centrally located, but for a long time they were kind of out of the city. So I think it does have something to do with fan loyalty, and a couple of those reasons are the New York Rangers is a much older team, and then they're a little bit more centrally located in New York. Okay. Anything else that you noticed from this visualization? Yes, over here.
그 2011년에 세인트루이스 같은 경우에는 11년에만 딱 만석이고 나머지는 다 이렇게 요동치고 관객 수가 일정하지 않은데 왜 2011년에만 딱 저렇게 그 시즌에만 만석이 됐는지 궁금합니다.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think during this time period, during this time period, they were an improving team. They made the playoffs year, and I think they started filling their, beefing up their fan base. They were increasing their fan base with continued success year after year. So I think that's part of the reason of the increase in attendance throughout these years right here. And it started going down a little. I don't have a good explanation for why it's gone down here. Because the team is still relatively good. So I don't have a very good explanation, but part of it is as far as this increase here was that the team started getting better and better, and I think that's it's a little more understandable. If we look at the Tampa Bay Lightning. So Tampa Bay Lightning during this time period, they were not a very good team. Did not make the playoffs very often, but over time, they started making the playoffs more and more. And these days, past few years, they've been a legitimate championship contender. They made the finals this season, and they're very good. Let's see, they also made the conference finals in this season, so like the semifinals in the National Hockey League during this season. So because of the changes in their team performance, that has affected their attendance. So I think we just identified another variable that we should probably consider if we're building a model, a statistical model to use for predicting attendance. We should probably include something about how good the team is. Anything else that you notice? Sorry?
많아서 그런 거 아닐까요?
예, 그 시즌권 판매량이 다른 그런보다 훨씬 많지 않았을까 하는 생각합니다.
For the St. Louis?
뉴욕 레이전스 팀 같은 경우.
Yes. So I think I believe the New York Rangers, basically their season tickets are they're sold out in season tickets. So they have all their tickets sold for the season or almost all their tickets sold for the season just because of full season ticket holders. So I think that's a big part of the reason that their attendance is very flat, or it's the same for every game. They basically are selling out every game from season ticket holders, maybe with very, very few single game tickets. So that could be one reason. All right, I think we'll move on. And here is the same figure, but instead of just the 4 teams that we saw, this is all 30 teams in the league. So I guess, is there anything else that we notice by looking at all 30 teams in the league if we look at this figure? Is there anything else we can observe from this visualization? So in my classes, if my students were quiet, I would just wait as long as I had to for them to speak up and start answering. And maybe our speakers, they think they're off the hook because they're done their talks, but maybe do you guys think they should maybe start answering some of these questions? I think so.
Maybe the Canadians are more loyal to the teams. I see the Calgary, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver has the quite steady audience, spectators.
Yes, yeah. So you can definitely see a trend with the Canadian teams. So there's Calgary, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, Winnipeg, Edmonton. Did I miss one? Ottawa. Ottawa, maybe not so much, but the other Canadian teams, they're all sellouts, and that part of that is probably because hockey is more popular in Canada than it is in the United States. This is a kind of an interesting one. There's a drastic change from these 4 seasons to these 6 seasons. That's because this team was originally in Atlanta, and this season moved to Winnipeg. So huge change in attendance when they were in Atlanta. Once they moved to Winnipeg, constant sellout from day one. So I'll just point out a couple more things, and then I think we're good to go and we can move on. So the thing that we noticed with Tampa Bay, when they started winning more games, their attendance got better and better. I think it's true with a lot of the teams on this chart. So, and you may not know if you're not familiar with the NHL, but during this time, Boston was not very good, and then they became a perennial contender. They were a championship contender for many years. Same thing happened with Chicago. They started winning, and they got more fans. Same thing with LA, Nashville. Kind of the same upward trend. So winning certainly seems to impact attendance. The location of the team, whether it's in North America or United States or Canada, seems to impact attendance. And so I think we learned a bunch of things about the data. And so let's talk about what we actually included in our model and what were the results of the model. So we already kind of made these observations. So let's kind of move on to this slide right here. And so here are the variables that we included in the model. So we included who the home team was and who the away team was, because we noticed that the location of the arena, whether it's in Montreal or New York or Ottawa, has an impact on how many fans that team has. And also the away team, we would expect to have an impact on how many fans that you get for a game. When the Montreal Canadiens or the New York Rangers come into town, that's probably a more popular game. Day of the week, we kind of mentioned. Saturday games are more popular than Tuesday games, so we would include day of the week in our model. Month of the year in our model, typically towards the beginning of the season, fans aren't as interested, but towards the end of the season, when the playoffs are getting closer, there's much more interest in those games. And holidays, we wanted to check different holidays, Thanksgiving, and also the week between Christmas and New Year is a big week for us in South Florida. because there's a lot of people who will come down and go on vacation in our area, especially those who live in the northern part, either in Canada or the northern part of the United States. They'll come down during those winter holiday weeks, and so there's a much greater population in our area during that time, and specifically a greater population of hockey fans during that time. So we wanted to check out the effects of holiday and include that in our model. So we included also in our model whether the two teams were in the same division, and they were, just try to attempt to account for, if the team is a rival or not, and if they're in the same conference. Their points during the previous year, so how good the team was during the previous year, how good the team was during the current year. So this is kind of a way to quantify team performance, and a few other things that I think we'll skip for now. And so we built a model that basically finds the impact that each of these variables has on attendance. And the key point is that it finds the impact of these variables independent of all other variables that we considered in the model. So, in other words, we find the effect of day of the week controlling for all other variables in the model, which is kind of an important point, because if teams were to schedule a bunch of big opponents on the weekend all the time, then the effect of a weekend game might be overstated because of that. High attendance on a weekend game could be because it's a Saturday, but it could also be because there's really good opponents on those days. So we kind of wanted to separate the effects of those things in our model. And so let's get to some of the results. And so here are the results for day of the week. And what we have here is, this is attendance along the bottom, and day of the week from Monday through Sunday along the side here. And this middle line right here is no change in attendance. And so the rectangles on this side would say there's a negative change in attendance, and these right here indicate positive change in attendance. So what this is saying is, having a game on a Monday, on average, all other things being equal, it means that we have around 690 fewer fans at a game than at an average game, average game not on a Monday. And whereas if we have a game on a Saturday, all other things being equal, we'll have about 1,000 more fans at one of those games than we would at an average game. And so this is kind of fits what we would sort of expect based on our just experience, which is that weekday games are less popular than weekend games. So Friday and Saturday are the two most popular days to have a game, and so that kind of fits what we already thought, but now we have a way to quantify how much better is a weekend game. And so here are the results for a month. And so this is, I don't know if it's hard to see in the back, but this is October through April, which is the basic, this is the NHL regular season, lasts from October to April. And so we see, much lower attendance early in the season and much higher attendance later in the season as we get closer to the playoffs. And it's basically increasing throughout the season pretty nicely there. So sort of what we expected, but again, now we have an estimate of how much does it matter? How much is the difference between an October game and a March game? This is another interesting one. So this is how much of an effect does the opponent have on a game? And so some opponents, are very popular, and so they have a positive effect on attendance, and some aren't as popular, have a negative effect on attendance. It's sort of interesting that 6 of the first 7 teams here at the top are the original 6 teams in the NHL. So they're the ones with the largest fan bases. So it makes sense that they're at the top of this list because they've been around for the longest amount of time. So that's sort of interesting. And then another interesting one is the effect that holidays has on attendance. So the one that we were very interested in was games between Christmas and New Year's. So we have the league as a whole has many more fans on these games that are between Christmas and New Year's. Probably because people aren't working or people are home for the holidays and they want to go see their team that they haven't been able to see for a year or something like that. So these holidays have a huge impact on attendance, and so do some of the other holidays here. Most holidays actually have a positive impact on attendance. The only ones that have negative impact attendance are Easter and Halloween in the United States, where people usually have other family traditions that they're doing on those days, so they're not as interested in going to sporting events on those days. So it sort of makes sense that those are less popular games to go to a game. And so let's sort of skip through a few of these. So we built that model using. Let's back up one here. So we built a model using those variables, and we just wanted to show a slide here that just gives you an idea of how good the results of that model were. So what this is showing is along the bottom here is our predicted attendance, and along the top here is actual attendance. I'm sorry, this is actually revenue. This is revenue. These are fake numbers because we can't show our real revenue numbers. But so this is projected revenue and actual revenue. And we for the projected revenue, we use the model that we just talked about building. So what this is showing is that there's a pretty good correlation between our predicted numbers and the actual numbers. So we've done a fairly decent job, especially considering that the only data that we've used is data that was available before tickets go on sale. And so once tickets go on sale, we can start using that information. And in fact, you can get a lot of information about how popular a game is by just looking at the tickets that are sold 60 days before a game. So what we've shown here is, in the red, we've shown the number of tickets that were sold for each of these games as of 60 days before the game was supposed to have taken place. All right, so this first one is for a game against Montreal. It looks like there's about 5,000 tickets sold for this game 60 days before the game. So 2 months before the game, there was already 5,000 single game tickets sold for this game. And so I've sorted these games in order, so in order of the number of tickets that were sold 60 days before the game. And so it's ordered by the red. And so the blue, if we look at this, the whole length of the rectangle, this is how many total tickets there were sold by the time the game happened. So basically what we see is the order that we have here, the order of popularity of the games, if you look at the number of tickets that were sold 60 days before the game, it sort of matches fairly well the final number of tickets that were sold. So we have like a downward trend here. We also have a downward trend for the final tickets sold. So what this is saying is that the games where there were a lot of tickets sold 60 days left before the game, they ended up being the most popular games for the most part. They ended up being the games for which there were the most tickets sold by the time the game happened. There's a few exceptions here. This is one of the exceptions. This had very low attendance relative to how many tickets were sold 60 days out. But there's kind of a reason for this that kind of makes sense. And this is Montreal, and they had their goalie, their best player, who was a goalie, got hurt in the middle of the season, and the team was not very good for the second half of the season. So this game, which was supposed to happen right at the end of the season, wasn't very popular because the team hadn't been doing well. And also we had very high ticket prices for that game, so higher than they probably should have been. So that kind of made the number of tickets sold for that game be very low. And this is another big outlier. You know, if you look at tickets sold 60 days before the game, there's very few of them. But we ended up having a lot of tickets sold for that game, and that's because we had a very successful promotion 10 days before the game where there's a special price for tickets, and we had about 4,000 tickets that were sold in one day because of this promotion. So those are two things that you know, doesn't fit the overall trend, but there's really good reasons for those things. But the point of this is you get more information about how popular a game is going to be if you start using tickets, the number of tickets sold, even just 60 days before a game, which is sort of a long time. It's 2 months before a game, and you can already get an idea of how popular the game is going to be. And so you can use both of these pieces of information to kind of determine where to set your prices. So this is sort of like a price optimization problem would be the application of this. And so a lot of the things that we have worked on so far have been related to trying to come up with the best prices to set each of these games at. And so these are two pieces of information that we use to do this. And so so that's kind of one specific project, and now I'm going to do an overview of a few more projects that we've worked on, and a lot of them are very visual, so I won't ask you to give any more observations of any of the visualizations. I'll make all the observations, so you're off the hook there, but just a few more things that, you know, a few more of the problems that we try to sort of solve using data. And so one of them has to do with season ticket holder renewals. So we wanted to come up with a way to predict how likely season ticket holders would be to renew their tickets so that we know what customers are the most at risk as far as not renewing. So maybe these are the customers that our customer service representatives want to spend the most time reaching out to and talking with and you know, giving their time and attention to. So some things that impact how likely a customer is to renew their season tickets, their location. So this is kind of a graph. I mean, these locations might not mean a whole lot to you, but I'll just tell you that these three at the bottom are the 3 regions that are closest to our arena. And those 3 regions have the highest renewal rate. So what we have here is, this is sort of the region. Across the bottom, we have the renewal rate. In other words, what % of customers renewed their season tickets for the next season. So that's what we mean by renewal rate. And so we have the highest renewal rate for the customers who are closest to the arena, which makes sense. Here's an interesting one. So this is the % of games that each customer attended. So this is saying that if a customer attends a lot of their games, in other words, if a customer is using their tickets, they're more likely to renew their season tickets. So they have higher renewal rates than those who don't use their tickets a whole lot. So if a customer only used their tickets for 40% of the games, they're only 70% likely to renew their season tickets. So much lower than a customer who used their tickets for all of their games. If they use their tickets for all their games, 95% of those people renewed their season tickets. So the number of games that they attend can tell us how likely they are to renew their season tickets. And another interesting one is, how did the team do in the games that they attended? So this is winning percentage in games attended. And so this is saying that the more games a team won while a customer attended, the more likely that customer is to renew. So if the team did not do very well during games that a customer attended, so this is winning percentage of just 20%. So there's a team that only won 20% of their games when a customer attended. Those customers, only 70% of them actually renewed their season tickets, whereas up here, 93% of those customers renewed their season tickets. So winning has an effect on whether or not customers will renew their season tickets. This is a similar plot for the average number of goals that there are in a game. And so this is goals for the home team, for our team, and also goals for the other team. So this is kind of saying that high-scoring games are more popular. So the more high-scoring games a customer attends, the more likely they are to renew their season tickets. So people like games where the team wins, games where they're high-scoring, and then this next one is the proportion of one-goal games. So this means that the final result of the game, there was only one goal in the difference between the two teams. So it was a 4-3 game or a 3-2 game. So the difference in the score was only one goal. So these are all the close games. So the more close games that a customer sees the percentage of close games that a customer sees when he attends games has an impact on whether that customer is going to renew their tickets. So the more close games, so if 60% of the games are close games, those customers renew their season tickets 94% of the time. If only 25% of the games that they attend are close games, only 77% of those customers renew their tickets. So customers like close games where their team wins and that are very high scoring. So all those things seem to impact the likelihood of a customer renewing their tickets. And so let's move on to just another thing quickly. And here's just a visualization of some seat data on a map of the arena. And so we kind of use things like this to sort of just try to determine trends, sales trends, what sections are most popular and what areas of the arena are most popular, which ones are least popular. You know, where do we have the most open inventory? So where do we have the most available seats and things like that. So it's just a way to visualize some of our data. We could look at a table of numbers and get the same information, but sometimes it's just much easier to look at it on a picture. So that's kind of what we're doing with these things. And then another interesting visualization that we've done is we've looked at different kinds of data on the map of South Florida. So this region is the region close to our arena that has the most fans, most of our fans. This little logo right here, this is where our arena is. This is sort of just, this is not, like, no one lives here. This is sort of just this wildlife that's there, basically. It's a national park. And, but this is where people live. There's a lot of people live. Miami is down here, if you are familiar with Miami. So this is the largest city that's close to us. Fort Lauderdale is another city that's close to us that has a fairly high population. But what we're showing on these maps is some demographic information. In this case, it's we're highlighting the graphs based on ethnicity. So over on the left, we've colored each region by the percentage of white people that are in each region. So Caucasians that are in each region. For the second graph is colored by the number of Hispanic people who are in each region. This is the number of black people who are in each region. So you can kind of get an idea of what South Florida looks like. It looks sort of segregated as far as where people live. There's very distinct areas where the white, Hispanic, and black populations are. And so we kind of, we can use this information as far as, targeting our sales and our marketing initiatives for certain groups of people. And then over here, we have, this is, I believe this was population. So this is the number of people that live in each region. Oh, no, I'm sorry. This was white, Hispanic, black, and other. So other could be, in most cases, for us at least, it's European nationalities, people with European origins. So we have a lot of high Russian population down in this area, and we also have lots of people from Scandinavia, so Finland and Sweden, who are big, also big hockey countries also that live in the area. So there's a pretty diverse population in South Florida. And this just gives us kind of an idea of where all of these people are located geographically in our region. So we can also plot some other information on maps of South Florida. So another interesting one is we used driving time to the arena. So this is driving time to arena. So yellow is much shorter driving time. Blue is very long driving times. So this gives us an idea of how long it takes people that live in each area to drive to the arena. So it's a little bit different than distance from the arena. You might, those of you who live in Seoul probably know that, depending on what part of Seoul you're in and depending on what time of day you're going from one part to another, the driving time could be significantly different, even though the driving distance is the same. So we measured driving distance during evening rush hour, during the work week for our stadium, and then this is just a map that shows age, so it's colored by age, house median income for the people in these areas, and then the average household value to give us an idea of where are the customers that have the most disposable income. So these are just a few of the things that we do on the business side, and maybe just for a couple minutes I'll talk about things that we've done on the hockey side and what kinds of data we've had there. So, and maybe I'll just skip this slide and move right to this. So what we see here is a part of the hockey, a hockey ice, a hockey rink, and down here is the goal. And so what we're plotting here is shot data. So this is data. The colors here represent the shooting percentage at each location on the ice. So red is much higher shooting percentage. So many more goals will go in. If a shot is taken from this location, it's much more likely that a goal is going to go in than a shot out here from this location. And so not too surprising, but we kind of get an idea of where people are shooting from and also how likely those shots are to go in the net and be goals. And so this is for the entire league, but not every team looks like the entire league. So this is one specific team, and their heat map sort of looks a little bit different than the map for the whole league. And then we can kind of do the same thing for players as well. So here's one particular player who mostly takes his shots. He's a right-handed player, so he mostly takes his shots from this side of the ice. And it's pretty well, just located in that region of the ice. So some players, have pretty predictable places where they like to take their shots from. Some players do not have very predictable locations that they like to take their shots from. So in this case, this player is sort of all over the place. Takes shots from here, takes shots from in front of the net, takes shots from this side of the ice. So that player is sort of all over the place. So you can get an idea of the tendencies of a player by just looking at where that player takes his shots most often. And so with that, I think that's the last slide on the end of the presentation.